You've heard it before, your realtor and lender work together. But what does that actually mean? Today, we're talking about why having a lender and realtor who operate as a team can make or break your deal and can save you time, money, and stress. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Closing the Deal. I am one of your hosts, Zach Dixon, and today we have both of us together again for another episode. Sitting across from me is my co-host, Sam Enright. What is going on this morning, Sam? How are you?
What's going on, man? I am doing real well today. It's a beautiful Saturday here in Ohio, and don't have many complaints in life.
Right there with you. Right there with you. Back on our original recording schedule. We've made it through the entire year, trying to change some things around, and now we're back on the OG schedule. So excited to see what the fall and winter brings for us, life, and closing the deal as a whole, for sure.
100%. Yeah, I think there's something to be said about being back on Saturday recordings. It just feel bouncier today. Feel more of life.
Couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, we have to, well, maybe not today. We'll see how it all shakes out, but we have to put one of our hobbies aside from the summertime to get back on this schedule, hobby being golf. But maybe we can squeeze one more round out here in November today. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, put it to the side, but man, just feels good kind of getting this out of the way and, done on the weekend. So, not having to get up at the butt crack of dawn on a weekday to get in here and, half tired still. So, I feel like we're pretty much recording about the time that I would get in the office most days anyway. So this feels like a more normal, recording time. I feel just more like myself than I would at like when we started like 7:30.
Couldn't agree more, brother. Couldn't agree more. What do we have on tap for the listeners today? What's our episode topic? What are we discussing?
Yeah, guys. So today we're going to be talking about why your lender and realtor need to be a team. This is a really, really important component of your entire transaction when you go to buy a house. Really from the beginning all the way to the end, right? So I think there's maybe a little bit of obviously it kind of goes without saying when you're in contract, those sort of things, I feel like it's, oh yeah, they need to be a team. They need to be communicating, but there's actually some really big advantages to doing, all of those levels of communication and being that, tight knit team when you're actually in the pre-approval process and when you're out looking for homes. And we'll kind of talk about just some different things, like some advantages to having such direct lines of communication when you're actually in that process, offering on houses, going and viewing different ones. It just makes everything flow a lot smoother, and it makes you, the buyer, feel more confident and more comfortable, right? When you're looking at homes and you get, maybe you're getting payment figures from from the lender at the same time, the, realtors communicating with the lender on how do we need to structure this deal. And so it makes you feel prepared for what it is that you're actually going to embark on, right? When you actually do put an offer in and if it gets accepted. So, that's what we're going to talk about today.
And ultimately, I think I really like the just going back to sports, kind of equating it to sports all in all. Sometimes in sports we automatically look at the team that has the most talent, automatically like they're going to win the game, they're going to win the championship no matter what. But the team that operates the best as a team is going to be the one that comes together, gets the common goal accomplished, wins that championship, whatever it may be. It may not necessarily be the most talented team out there, but the team that kind of, comes together, is cohesive, works together towards the common goal. Those are going to be the most successful teams, in my opinion. And that just, kind of relays over to the professional side, to the business side of things as well, and what we're going to talk about. So definitely an important aspect as you get started in your home buying journey is to, again, surround yourself with the correct team there.
Yeah, for sure. It is, it plays massive advantages. So you guys getting started here, let's just go ahead and dive right in. Why teamwork between realtor and your lender matters. I mean, as Zach kind of said, right, just even in relaying it to sports, we always often see, you may have a really good real estate agent that you're working with, but if your lender is subpar, their weaknesses are going to show through, right? So even if you have a stellar real estate agent, but communicates, stays on top of everything, but you got a lender who doesn't communicate, you don't hear from them for a week, 2 weeks at a time, there's going to be a breakdown across the team there, and it's going to make you feel ultimately uneasy or maybe unsettled throughout the process, right? Because there's going to be a lot of question marks, even though you may have one component of it, going above and beyond. If the other component is not, it's going to obviously, lower the confidence that you have throughout the transaction. So, I mean, I guess to kind of break all that down, we need to start with what the connection is, right? We oftentimes have clients. I know Zach will have clients reach out, want to get started looking for a house. Guys, we've obviously covered a lot of this, but the connection is that your lender is going to help you secure financing for a property, and your real estate agent, in easy terms, is going to help you secure a home to finance, right? So, they are two sides of the same coin. You need both in order to get to where you need to go. You need a great real estate agent who's going to be able to help you navigate the market, going to be able to help you navigate offers, the houses that you're looking for, getting you into these places when they're fresh on the market, those sort of things. And your lender, you're going to need a good, solid lender to help you when it comes to securing financing. What does that timeline look like? How in depth do they go in the pre-approval process to try to help expedite that, that contract, so that maybe you can get a little bit more aggressive on a closing date, all these different things, right, that go into it. And so the connection is always going to be that they both, again, work simultaneously in order to help you achieve the same goal, which is, home ownership. And you're probably asking yourself, well, where does, what would a bad relationship look like? Why you guys are talking about why they need to be a team? Obviously, what does it look like if they're not a team? Quantify that, I guess, into what actually makes sense. Because obviously we can say, yeah, communication is not great, but what does that look like? Well, that could potentially be missed deadlines, extending closing dates, having to restructure loans, or if a real estate agent knows something's going on with the property and doesn't call the lender ahead of time and let them know, and we wait till the appraisal comes back, and then it's like, oh, well, we already knew that was there. And it's like, well, why didn't we have that conversation before we sent the appraiser out? Because now we have to fix it and then send the appraiser back out. And it's like all these different things, right? And so the best transactions, the best relationships, the best, I feel like when a client comes to us and says, guys, we had a great experience with you, typically is always going to be when both lender and real estate agent are on the same wavelength, same frequency. We're operating together and doing things, like I just think about, just a common example. Sorry, it just came to my mind. But, we have a client right now, VA purchase, real estate agent calls, says, hey, guys, here's what we're looking at with the property. Septic does not have risers installed. Do we think that this is going to be an issue when the appraiser goes out? We say, yeah, obviously it's varies by appraiser. Some may call it out, some may not, but there's a good chance that it could get called out. So guess what? We're already getting that problem fixed ahead of time, right? And so just because of that open line of communication right there, we already knew what a problem was going to be. We're taking care of it before we even go down the route of having an appraiser go out, and then we have to send them back out for a problem that we already knew might be a problem, and so it's just things like that. It's just little things that add up to be ultimately a big thing when it comes to, can this transaction close on time? Does it go smoothly? Is everybody on the same page?
I couldn't agree more, brother. Getting back to my sports example there, I'm telling you, we might come back to this a couple more times in the episode, because again, it's just you have to be a cohesive unit in any aspect of life to accomplish the goal that you have in front of you. And in this instance, obviously, the goal is to close on a home, get into a new home, be a homeowner at this point. So again, we're gonna beat the dead horse all day long, and just make sure that everybody knows we need to have a great team on our side here for sure. So ultimately, moving on into our next segment, and piggybacking off of what we just talked about with Sam there, we have to have great collaboration, and kind of what does that look like as a whole. When you're a home buyer and you're out looking for homes and you decide that you're ready to, put an offer in on a home, a lot of those small details that go into the contract need to be discussed with your lender prior to absolutely writing that contract as a legal document and following it. One good example is the closing date. If you are not communicating with your lender, if your real estate agent is not communicating with your lender, and just determining a closing date kind of out of the blue without discussing with anybody, much more likely in that instance that the closing date expectations at that point will not be able to be met. So again, it just goes back to what Sam was talking about in the previous segment. It's so simple to have that conversation prior to writing in whatever it is in the offer, whether it's closing date or loan commitment period or, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever it is, that conversation just needs to be had up front. And that honestly goes back to before the pre-approval process. If a buyer comes to me and says that they love this specific house, I'm going to first ask if they're pre-approved. And if they say yes, I'm going to follow up with that lender as well. I'm going to make sure that we're all on the same page before we get into a situation where, we go see this house, the buyer now falls in love with it, they're ready to make an offer, and they can't afford it, unfortunately, because, that communication was just not had up front. And ultimately, past just the kind of requirements that go into the purchase contract and things that can get held up. Obviously, having a conversation with our lender beforehand when we are writing that offer and whatnot can help strengthen the offer as well. Can help make it more desirable for the seller. If we have an idea of a closing date and I talk to the lender and he says, hey, maybe we can get done in 30 days instead of 40 days, that will, look better for the seller all in all. They want to get the property sold. They want to get it off. So ultimately, that is probably something that's going to look more advantageous for the seller as a whole. But again, wouldn't have been possible if I didn't have that conversation with the lender prior to writing the offer. And so all of those things, it is just a collaborative effort, guys. It can't be stressed enough when you are writing offers, when you're in the contract process. Ultimately, from day one to day X, whatever it is, when you close, it is a collaborative process. We're going to be calling, texting, in a group chat, whatever it is, we're going to be communicating. And that's exactly what your team needs to be doing, because again, it can close doors for you if you are not communicating and allow you to, kind of block yourself from blessings, as I like to say. So make sure, again, that we are, collaborating. You want your team to be collaborating and working together towards a common goal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And a couple examples, obviously come to mind when thinking about that, just as as professionals collaborate, and just kind of getting into what does a great collaboration look like. I mean, I think, it really, like I talked about, and you just talked about, obviously, it really starts in the pre-approval process, right? Because if there's open lines of communication, you can get very strategic in how you make these offers. We've talked about it before, what identifying pain points of the seller, right? And so, we've had agents reach out to us and say, hey, on this house, the seller is looking for highest and best offer, right? So can we stretch the budget for our client a little bit? Here's the exact property address, here's the taxes, here's everything that goes into it. What can we do to help make our offer the most competitive? In other situations, we had a obviously Zach called me a few weeks back with one of our clients we were working with and said, hey, what does the timeline look like? Do you think we can move this up? Do you think we can get a little bit more aggressive with a closing date? I just had another agent who on last week when they were writing an offer had asked me, hey, do you think we can close? This was obviously like the very beginning of November. Do you think we can close before Thanksgiving? Do you feel, are you comfortable with us putting a 25-day contract together? Yep. Hey, we're good. We've already documented these things from the borrower. I think we're going to be fine. I think we should have really no issue getting that done. And so it's just opening those lines of communication. When you have agents who are going out and making offers, sometimes again, sometimes there can be a level of disconnect, right? And I've experienced that as well. So, sometimes we'll pre-approve a borrower that is not working with an agent. They have not even decided who they're going to work with yet. And so we send them the pre-approval letter. We have the conversation with the buyer. One of the examples that comes to mind is we tell them, you don't want to pay for your closing costs? Okay, you're going to need to structure seller concessions into your contract. So they go out, they get a real estate agent. Most buyers are not going to retain that information. And so they go out and they set up a contract offer with no seller concessions. And then we disclose them and they're like, what are all these closing costs? Why do I have to pay these? And it's like, we had this conversation when we pre-approved you. At that time, you did not have an agent. So we gave the information to you. I don't even know if you started working with an agent. You know what I mean? Like we have, it's just one of those things. We haven't really heard from you. Next thing you know, boom, we're in contract. And, so it's just, it's one of those things, right? And so that's how the lines of communication on both sides can be advantageous and also not advantageous. And so, either way, sometimes when those contracts come over and we don't have what we need, we got to pivot, right? And so it's just little things like that. So just give you guys a few examples of kind of what that looks like, right? And why it's so important and how it makes the contract period, the pre-approval period go that much smoother.
I couldn't agree more for sure, because again, it just goes back to what I said is if we don't have that conversation up front, you may be blocking yourself from something that you want to happen. So ultimately, just make sure your team is on the same page. So ultimately, I would say the best deals happen when your realtor and lender are talking daily, strategizing, problem solving, and anticipating issues before they happen.
Yeah, guys. So obviously I know we kind of talked about it, or I gave a few examples, right? But we just talked about what is a great relationship between, a lender and a realtor, and obviously what does that look like, the cohesiveness there. But what does it look like when it doesn't? And we've already given some examples, but I think ultimately the biggest thing is it comes back to you, the buyer, right? Because you are kind of in the middle of it all. And so if you have a real estate agent who's saying one thing, doing one thing, and then you talk to your lender and they're saying and doing another thing, you ultimately are going to be the one kind of in the middle, like, what the heck is going on? These guys are talking about two different things. They're not communicating with each other. I'm confused. And especially if you've never bought in a house before, then there's going to be an even deeper level of stress or just lack of understanding because you've never been through the process before, right? I mean, we have a lot of first time home buyers that we work with, and a lot of them, I start asking them questions as the lender, like, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never done this before. I got zero clue. And so obviously we kind of bridge that gap and talk about it. But if that's not conversations that are being had on both sides, and then the realtor and the lender are not communicating as well, it can just ultimately leave you, the buyer, feeling very lost, very uncertain, and probably very stressed throughout the course of the entire transaction, right? And so that's why it's very important. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there's a lot of great professionals out there in this field, in both fields, I should say, in the lending side and the um, real estate agent side. I mean, there's a lot of bad players out there on both sides as well. So it's ultimately, you just got to figure out how to vet your team out, right, and pick the right ones, but because you don't want to be left feeling like you're on an island, working with two opposing forces on the same goal.
Yeah, and ultimately, just want to reiterate what you said there is it does come back to you as the buyer. You are the one making this big financial purchase at this time. You are the one taking on this obligation of owning the home. And so if the two people, kind of outside the situation are arguing, ultimately it comes back to you. The stress, the anxiety, the consequences of it all are going to come back to you as a buyer. And I don't say that to scare anybody, obviously, but it's just you have to know that information going in. If you are okay with your team not communicating and not being cohesive and not working towards the common goal, that's okay if you have that expectation going in. But more than likely, you as a first-time home buyer, you as a buyer in general, are not going to have that expectation. You're going to have the expectation that they are going to work together and that they are going to be working towards the common goal. And so ultimately, you just have to make sure you're looking out for yourself too. These two people are going to be looking out for you as a buyer, but ultimately you as a buyer need to be looking out for yourself as well.
Yeah, for sure. When your lender and your realtor don't communicate, you feel it. It's like being stuck between two people speaking different languages about your biggest purchase ever.
And brother, I would say that is not a good feeling. I don't know if you've ever been out there just listening to a foreign language, just hearing it
Yeah, I've
beside you.
listened to
It's
foreign languages. I've been lost every time I do. So
not a good
I
feeling.
no, not a good feeling at all. Sometimes I'm lost when people speak English though, too. So
Yeah, it's true.
just got to tune some of that out sometimes. But um well, yeah, guys, I mean, kind of taking it into the last thing here, we've talked about what does it look like? What does a good team look like? What does a bad team look like? Now, I guess the question becomes, and I think we obviously talked about this on our, I can't remember, that was part one of the How to Buy a Home series, right? Surround yourself with the right
Hmm.
team, but
Yep.
how to build your, I guess, quote unquote, dream team, right? How to get involved with great real estate agents, great lenders. You know, I think ultimately it's a question, or it's a, I guess, answer as old as time, right? But how do we know anything? Is you got to vet them, you got to ask questions, right? You can't just take their word for it. I guess in the forefront, you got to be willing to ask them some questions, see what their answers are, and figure out, kind of if this is the right thing for you, right? So, you know, I mean, I don't want to toot our own horn, but I do feel like on our end, we always say communication is our bread and butter. We are a mortgage banker. We are not a bank. We're not a credit union. So, realistically, we're not going to have the best rates on the planet. That's just the reality of the situation. If you work with a bank or a credit union, they're likely going to be able to tighten their margins up, and they're going to be able to get you a better interest rate. But they also work 9 to 5. They also, when after hours is after hours, you're probably not getting a hold of them. And so, our call on our side is really just all about communication. Not to say that we don't have other things. We do. We have, obviously most things that other lenders are going to have as well. But that is our bread and butter. That's what we come back to, is over communication, always being in touch with our clients, always being available for questions, always being able to help. And, there's no on our side, there's no real estate agent that we won't work with, no real estate agent that we won't communicate with. That's not how we operate. We don't try to shift our, buyers into specific real estate agent or anything like that. We're open and willing to communicate with any of them. And I think that that's ultimately one of the biggest things, right? If you have, I would say there are people in this industry, because I've heard stories time and time again. There's people in this industry that hold grudges. There's people in this industry that have had bad transactions with certain lenders because of one thing, or certain real estate agents because of one thing. They're like, I will never work with them again. Like, I don't want anything to do with them. And then, what if a buyer really likes that lender and then they want to use you as the real estate agent? And there's just like, you had this one bad experience and now they're on two opposite playing fields because they both have said, well, we don't want to work with that person. It's like, we're forgetting the common goal here, right? The common goal is about the client themselves, and not, oh, it's this real estate agent or it's this lender. That really is quite irrelevant, is it not? I mean, if the buyer feels like this is the lender that they want to work with, or this is the real estate agent they want to work with, who are we to tell them that they should go somewhere else? I mean, that's just my feeling. But and I feel like I just kind of got off onto a different segue from all of that. But again, I just think that if you approach it in an open manner, and this is talking to anybody who may listen who is in the business or in the field, like, if I'm not into, I don't understand approaching things in a negative manner. If somebody wants to work with whoever the freak they want to work with, like, I'm going to be there and be like, heck yeah, man, let's make it happen. Like, we'll do it, and we'll open lines of communication, we'll make it happen. And so I think operating and finding people of integrity, people that care, people that are genuine and authentic to actually wanting to help you, and not it being about money or being about another closing that we can post on Facebook that we did, or anything like that. You know what I mean? Like, obviously we're here to help you achieve one of the biggest goals of your life, most likely. And so that's where I think you got to start with how to build the right team, right? Is auditing people's actual intentions.
I couldn't agree more, brother. I could not agree more. And I think on, just on the flip side, a little bit of things, there is value in, finding a collaborative team that has, had success in the past. Going back to my sports examples, if a team is brand new, added a bunch of free agents, did a bunch of trades, they have no chemistry together, they're going to take a little bit of time to gel, and they're going to take it a little bit of time to find their rhythm, find their success. And I would say, it just goes back to just anything in life. If you have chemistry, the end goal is going to come a lot easier if you do have that chemistry already established, or that the rapport, already together. And so there is definitely value in finding, a team that has done this time over time, maybe had a little bit of hiccups here and there, but we're able to get through it, faced a little bit of adversity, and we're able to face the challenges head on and tackle them, instead of a team that faces that adversity for the first time, and you don't really know what you're going to get out of them, if they're going to fold, or if they're going to continue to keep pushing for you as the buyer. And so I think that there is definitely some value in finding a team that has worked together, has proven results and success, and has that chemistry as a whole. So
Yep, I agree. I definitely think that there's something to be said about that, and um, you know, definitely got to find people, audit the intentions and make sure that you're working with people that know what the heck they're doing.
for sure, had to throw me another little sports example in there, of course.
Yeah, of course. You did say you would beat the horse dead by the end of this, so I
I
think
did
that
indeed.
I think it is dead. So, oh man, but yeah, I mean, sports are always a good, have great I don't know why.
Comparisons to life,
Yes, great
segues. Yeah.
comparisons to life. Yes,
Yeah.
very, very good. So, um, but yeah, guys. Well, I mean that kind of gives you an idea of what it should look like if you're, or I guess why it's so important to work with a team, who is, you know, mutually invested in your best interest, right? And getting you to the finish line in the best way possible, and not just getting you there, because there is a difference to a team that can get you there versus a team that's going to shoulder a lot of that burden and a lot of that stress for you to help, make it the best experience for you possible. So, yeah, I think that wraps it for me. I don't have much else to add. You got anything else?
I do not. I do not. Hopefully, you guys found some value from this one, and have an idea on how to construct that team as you get started with that home buying search.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Well, if you ever need anything from Zach or myself, obviously you guys are more than welcome to reach out, and we are happy to help and kind of walk you guys through whatever you need. So, really appreciate you guys tuning in to this episode, and yeah, we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Absolutely. Cheers, guys.